I should put on Mark Greene's last Instagram post because he did a very Mission Impossible,
Mm.
um background, which mind you, like I actually really like Mission Impossibles and I like Born Identities and I love the does that mean I like the savory kind of content? I don't know. I really like the action films and they're all always run by men and Wonder Women, and this is not where we're starting. But we can transition out of this. Hey, Mark Greene, how are you?
I'm all right, man. I was looking at the title of this conversation, and I posted in the chat. I was like, "Man, expert, that is
I
brutal."
see that chat.
Who
Don't
wrote
you
that
think
copy?
you? I don't know. First off, expert is so
Yeah.
subjective.
Well,
Um,
okay. So one of the things I tell men all the time is, I'm just the expert on my version of it, man. Everybody's got you're the expert on your life. I just really want to lead with that
yeah,
today for
but can't
sure.
you just say, Mark, like, I've got some. I mean, this is the thing about like, right. No one has time for experts. No one has time for certainty. No one has time for people who like know they know, and we all know they don't. But
Hmm.
you do have best practices. You
Hmm.
do have some insights grounded in research that
I do.
can qualify you as knowing maybe a few more minutes ahead of other people.
A little bit. Yeah, I like to think so.
I think
But I,
so.
I also think that the issue we face today as boys and men in America isn't data driven and it isn't research driven. I mean, the research tells us we're all isolated, deeply alone, but the solution is friendship. And that happens between human beings in the social, and it's completely organic and it's completely individualized in the sense of you never know how it's going to go or what's going to get created. But that's the thing we're sort of blocked from doing, and that's the thing that I really want to give people as an option. If I know anything about masculinity at all, it's that we can be friends with each other, even if we're very, very different. And when I come on here, I'm really excited to hear what young men are saying, what they think, what they're up against, and I want to share what I'm up against.
I sort of feel like why do all men want to be dictators? I I don't necessarily intend for it to be triggering, but also if it does trigger, please by all means. Um I think I would love to hear folks' thoughts on that. And
Mm.
what our relationship is with control.
Yeah,
And I
and
don't
what our
know
relationship is with not being at the bottom of the pecking order.
what does
Whatever
that
you do, don't end up there.
yeah, what is that what tomorrow is about?
I think that Donald Trump is a classic case of a dominance based, hierarchical masculinity playing out. That is, get to the top of the pecking order, or someone's going to be above you on the ladder and step on your hands. And he's gone as far and as fast as he can, but he does it by climbing over everybody else.
Do you think he has friendships?
Mm, that's a tough one. Um, Donald Trump, there's stories about Donald Trump showing up and punching Donald Trump Jr. in the face in front of other college students for not
When?
for not wearing a suit back when Trump Jr. was in college. If you Google Trump punching his son, this story comes up, right? And I believe that Trump's father was probably pretty aggressive and pretty abusive. And, I had a therapist friend years ago tell me that it takes 3 generations to create
A
someone
monster?
who's truly sociopathological, kind of, off the rails. And this is what we're talking about in the lives of most boys and men. Somewhere along the line in our family structures, many of us had men ahead of us a generation or two that were really weren't interested in what was going on for us, just really wanted to get us lined up and successful and climbing the dominance ladder.
When you think about that, like that it's 3 generations, what does that mean? Like I can one, this feels so terrible to say, but there, so I'll say it publicly. But it strikes me that like I have dated men where I've heard stories about fathers or grandfathers, and I'm like, That's terrible. That's
Yeah.
terrible. And like, talk to me about like that three generation thing. It one, in some ways it's a testament to people who have been able to be resilient and rise through and rise up and over and navigate around it.
Sure.
I believe we're everything that we're wrestling against is all inherited. Um,
Mhm.
so I wonder a little bit more about like that three generation thing. Do you think Don Jr. is the one that
Well,
we really have to look out for? Because this
imagine that
feels pretty bad.
if we don't, some of us. Okay, so my son's 20 years old now, and when I raised him, one of the things I wanted to do was to not for him not to have to deal with some of the stuff I dealt with as a kid. Now that's an inflection point, right? And in my opinion, it's an inflection point up. So I said I'm going to listen more to him. I'm going to
Right.
pay attention to what's going on for him, all that. But if you have a generation and the child makes the same reinforces the decision of the parent, and the inflection point continues down, then by the third generation, you're looking at a collective or cumulative generational impact of not only trauma, but ideas about parenting and ideas about what a man is that are very, very difficult to undo by the third. But the third individual, their inflection point is much more difficult to put in place.
Well, is it also because it's like they don't know how to contextualize it, or they don't know how to undo the story or see the sequencing of the story? I mean, one of the things that I became obsessive about in writing my book is like, wait, or I even see it in my own family, like, oh, this person's not very good with conflict because her mother was always avoidant, and her mother was the 11th child of Norwegian immigrants, and her mother and her
Mm.
parents died by suicide when they were rounding up immigrants. I'm like, I'm not sure where in that sequence the musculature to be like humble, ask questions, be part of conflict solution, like all of those kinds of things. It just feels like um all those, you can like sequence it out exactly how people have gotten to where they are. And I imagine after a third generation, the story is like impossible to break out of. But Mark,
Yeah.
in response to Master Liberty, who's talking about control, and I don't think I'm baiting people with the title of the show. I mean, maybe I am. This is pretty quick for Master Liberty to get on the chat. But um I actually think people want control, not necessarily because it's an innate human characteristic. It's one we're all familiar with. It's
Mm.
like the DNA element of like joy and vulnerability and sadness. Like we have the experience of being able to manage people, but it does feel like the price tag of being able to control other people, that price tag is much higher in the American currency, the American identity, particularly the male American identity, broadly speaking.
Well, I think that the need to control other people comes in the absence of more satisfying relationship options, right? So if you grow up in a culture that shames and bullies boys for wanting and needing close friendship, which ours does, then you break that connection for boys. What they're left with is this other version of gratification or self validation, which is power over others. And so they pursue that. And some of us are very benign about how we pursue it. We just want to get the better car and the mortgage and the good looking wife. And in that way, we move up in terms of status. We're not aggressively shoving other men down, but some percentage of men actually pursue power by shoving other men down. And when we talk about the Trump parade, Donald Trump is essentially showing his power over everyone else by marching a huge amount of money past the reviewing stand. $45 million is the estimate right now for the cost of that parade. And the fact that he tried to demand it in his first term and got turned down, he never forgets. He never forgets a slight like that. That's on his little chart of status and dominance, and he wants to erase that by having a parade today. And he's doing that parade at the very same time that he's put U.S. military on the ground on U.S. soil in Los Angeles to supposedly suppress a violent insurrection. When in fact we all know that is basic social unrest,
Right.
which could have been handled by the city easily. But Donald Trump's also using ICE going into all these cities and doing I mean, filling the airways with images of mothers and fathers screaming as they're dragged away from their children by ICE agents. We as Americans watch this over and over and over again. And finally, we come out on the streets and say no. And Donald Trump says, bingo, gotcha. Now I'm sending in the troops because you guys are a violent insurrection. So this is all a power game. It's all a dominance game. And when we as boys and men grow up in a culture where, I mean, the most, I think, uh, let me just stop for a minute and say, I'm an old guy. I'm 65, right? When I was
Is that
19,
old?
18, I could have I could have become an incel easily because I had such a sense of low self-worth. I had the feeling that certain kinds of guys were getting all the girls. I had all of these ideas, but it just was self-loathing for me because there wasn't a larger narrative which said which blamed women and blamed chads and blamed all the rest of it. But the bottom line is that when we are in a culture where the idea is if you're not rich, good looking, super successful, super powerful, then you're going to have a shitty life as a man. Everybody starts trying to race up that ladder, and it's horrible. And the degree to which the utter absence of friendship and community and support of other boys and men in our lives leaves us alone in trying to climb that ladder, it makes it even worse. So all of these things come together culturally and socially, and we end up with some men who go hard up the ladder and they don't care who they hurt. And we have other men who are saying, you know what, I think I want something different. And our work, the work that I'm doing with Walking Talking Men, creating local friendships for men in our own neighborhoods, is the opposite of all of that. I'm we're really working hard to talk across difference, talk across age, talk across race, religion, all that stuff, and walk together and create friendships in our own neighborhood. And I have to tell you, Jenna, when I have to get on here and talk about Trump or talk about all this binary, what did Idris call? He called it this idea that we all see each other as existential threats, right? When I have to have that conversation about politics, about elections, I feel a little sick to my stomach, right? It's exhausting. Nothing generative comes out of it for me. But when I get to come on here and talk about what goes on in our walks, what men are talking about to each other when they're actually accepting each other and curious about what's going on and creating that friendship spark that we remember from being young boys, I feel good. I feel better. I feel like something's coming into being that really is worth living for. And that's the thing that I don't think Donald Trump has. You asked if he had friends. I think he had people he competed with. I think he had people I think Jeffrey Epstein was his friend, but they were both just modeling power over women and girls. That's all they were doing. And when it came down to it, I don't think he had any loyalty to Jeffrey.
Mm-mm.
So we have to ask a question between dominance hierarchies and what is the more meaningful and fundamental friendship between boys and men, which is the thing that our culture forbids us to have.
So someone in the chat, if you can skim it while I pose this next question to you. I have been studying at the feet of Rianne Eisler, who is a 90-plus-year-old woman who wrote The Chalice and the Blade and has, was one of the first anthropologists to come out and be like, this whole like survival of the fittest mentality, strongman theory, like very male dominated is an inaccurate interpretation of how humans work. And Master of Liberty, who is one of our favorite people on here,
Yeah.
shared a comment about like actual human nature. Now, Rianne's husband David is also one of the foremost scholars on Darwinianism. That's not the word, but Darwinism, whatever, about Darwin. And he's written multiple books about how after Darwin wrote all of his scientific papers observing the natural world around him in the Galapagos, that how the culture then interpreted what he
Mm,
said as
yeah.
very top down, binary esque survival of the fittest. And his if you say like, what's Darwin's rule, what's Darwin's big takeaway, it is survival of the fittest. I should have quizzed you to see if you knew that. And what David, Rand's husband, has pointed out multiple occasions, that he only mentioned of like his like 10,000 pages that he's written, survival of the fittest twice. And caring and caretaking of reptilian species, mammals, was only the reason why species survived and why individual animals, whatever, survived.
Yeah.
And so, in the question that Master Liberty phrased, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make sure I have the way that you frame this question correctly, which is, but isn't this just the reptilian side of our brain? Isn't this just how we operate as a species? That somebody's always going to want to exert power and control because this is how species propagate. Again, Darwin does not agree with that, even though that's how white Europeans interpreted his research, because that was beneficial for their capitalistic society and how to control more people. But do you think that's true? That like, oh, you guys, there's always going to be someone who wants to have more power and control. I actually think I'm one of those people. I like to control, I like to have control, not power, but I like to control if we're having sushi or pizza. I like to decide the schools. I'm the final word on like the schools that my kids go to. Like I want that kind of control. Do you think that's inevitable? Do you think this reptilian stance that we often are like, yeah, this is how it's always been, how it always is accurate?
Well, I want to say that the biology frame for any human behavior is in some way, has some validity. I'm not going to argue against it, right? I mean, but I will say this: it's interesting that when you talked about Darwin, you said Darwin wrote a bunch of stuff, and then society
Correct.
defined his work. So
Correct.
when you say the word society, you're talking about the social, what gets created in the back and forth of the social. And I see the social as a trending wave line, a collective movement, culture as well as part of that. And when you have a culture which is trending toward divisiveness and this sort of polarized political frame, then everything which is occurring either seeks to create an inflection point away from that or adds to it, accelerates it, right? So there is no like biology that per se guarantees a trend line socially, guarantees the inflection points that get created. What it is that the social either accelerates it into something worse or begins to move it into something better.
Right.
And you were talking to Jamal Idris, and he was noting that the thing that's the best predictor of success in any social calamity, any catastrophe, COVID or otherwise, isn't whether you're a democratic country or not, or any of that stuff. It's about whether the different groups trust each other, and trust is linked to is akin to this idea of friendship that we're working on, right? That we actually know our
Right.
neighbors, that we know some men in our lives. Otherwise, if I don't know any men, if I don't have any close friendships with guys that I walk with a couple days a week, and we go and then hang out and have coffee and whatever, if I don't have that rich social connection, then men to me are just that biological entity, and they are just that competitive entity. That's what they represent. So when I look at society or the social, I think, well, this is all fucked up. And so when it starts to trend down, I add my voice to that downtrend. I'm like, wow, society's a fucking mess, and that group over there is responsible, and so on. So how close the social informs our view and how we express our biology based on how the social is operating in our lives, I think means that both of these things are crucially important, right? And I can tell you this: when I walk, some of the guys I'm walking with are 30 years younger than me. Like I say, different race, different background. Some of them have kids, some of them don't. Some of them are gay, some of them are straight. This sense that we all care about each other and that we all want to hear each other's stories and we all want to be involved in each other's lives. I didn't have that for 40 years. 40 fucking years. I was in the man box doing all this hyper competitive shit, trying to show off my girlfriend and my car and my successes and whatever. And I never got away from the simple, isolated loneliness of that. When you're lonely, you have immense amounts of anxiety, and that anxiety can be manipulated politically, and there's your down inflection point.
There's 17 different directions to take this. But what I'm hearing you say, which is also what Shamal said, yes. Well, I actually don't know if he said this yesterday. I've spent so much time adjacent to that man that I can quote him often, which is conflict is inevitable. Conflict is inevitable, which when he first says that, and I'm a Quaker, I get like a little like, oh no, come on, I want you to tell me that like peace isn't, conflict is inevitable, but
Yeah.
violence is not. Conflict is inevitable, but violence is not. And now those levels of disagreement, like they exist no matter what. It's like a pre-existing condition. I have an autoimmune disease, and where it came from, who knows? Is it because like the air conditioning filters that my parents used when I was 6? Is it because the water I was drinking? It was because who knows?
Mm.
And it was like laying, it was like there, it was laying dormant. So when I think about like the violent capacity of us, I sort of, I don't know if I'm going to be able to thread this needle, but it feels like what I'm seeing Master Liberty write in chat. Can you see it, Mark? Just confirming you can see the chats.
Yes.
Okay,
When I do this, I'm reading the chat.
great. That it feels like there's this belief that we've always been a fill in the blank. We've always been competitive. It's always been this. Men have always been strong, or whatever it might be. And that story to me is a myth. It's inaccurate. It's, really very much sourced from the start of the Abrahamic religions and how capitalism started to thrive. And yes, it was much easier to control certain types of populations to be able to extract more things to support economies and control governments. I also believe that we do have that tendency there that gets triggered by the society. So as Shamal said yesterday, anarchy and authoritarianism grow from the same soil, where like one begets one, begets one, begets one. Like how many text chains am I on that say, if he lays a finger on this one elected official, I'm gonna, and I'm like, what are you gonna do? Like there's everyone's breaking point of seeing moms and babies ripped apart. It's moms and babies. And, when I think about the border thing that he did 6 years ago, when he separated parents and children, it was like the left walked right into his hands. And also he was separating children and babies, that like we have some of these innate desires internally, or we have the capacity internally for violence. But it's about whether or not our society can catch us in those moments. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a son, and who has an older daughter, who has an older sister. So I have a 7 and a 9-year-old. When they were what was it, like 2.5, 3, and 5? He would bite her a couple of times, right? And it was this. That was like one of those things where like I lost my mind. One of my kids ran into the street without looking both ways. I lost my mind. There are socializing tactics that we catch them to be like, you can't bite people. You can't run into the middle of the streets, that are part of keeping us safe and making sure we stay socialized enough to like survive. And so
Yeah.
I just feel like we're constantly market. I don't know if you find this in some of your walking groups where it's just sort of like, yeah, that's how it's always been. But I'm really calling bullshit on that.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I find in my walking groups, and it's really very difficult to sort of make this clear without um, being there and experiencing it for yourself, right? We have a little website, walkingtalkingmen.org. It's a 3-page website. It offers a little script. You can put it on your local Reddit for your neighborhood or Facebook, and men will show up and you can walk with them. And the men who self-select into these walks are already aware they need friends. Some of them are like, yeah, my wife pointed me to this. I'm all in. But the point that I would make is that if our survival, Rand Eisler's not wrong. If our survival is based on our ability to care for each other and we don't know anybody, we literally fucking don't know anybody, then how are we going to care for each other?
Right.
Right. So this is a void that's been created by a hyper competitive masculine culture that literally shames us, shames boys when they're young for wanting close friendship. Niobe Way's research, if you go read her book, Deep Secrets, literally boys in early adolescence. I love my best friend. By late adolescence, I'm moving away from that friendship because I don't want to be seen as a little kid, girly, or gay. And at that point, boys' suicide rates become 4 times that of girls. That process of breaking boys, not only friendships, but belief in friendships, means that we go through life without that circle of friendships that can transmute our experience of our biology and of moments of crisis for us. I'm having a fucking crisis. I'm going to start screaming at someone I don't know because I have no one to talk to about it. Or I go on my walk and I say, this thing is happening. And then talk in our walks, talk about shit that's going on for them regularly. And we say pretty much the same thing every time. Hey, brother, I've been there myself. I know how that feels.
Mm-hmm.
And B, tell me more about that. Help me understand how it's going for you and that. And just the chance to talk to another person, if you're a young man your age, if you're a young man, an older guy. Some of the guys who talk to me, they've never had a kind word from their father, never. And I have the joy of being able to show up for them and just say, I think you're doing amazing
Yeah,
stuff,
I
and I think
affirm
you're
you.
dealing
I
with something
see you.
really
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
And this is a void in our lives, which is over here. Over here is all this theory about culture. Listen, I've spent 20 years writing and speaking and talking about the structural and the systemic and masculinity and all this stuff. Great work. Glad I did it. Good job, Mark. But over here is the void, the lack of friendship. And last November, I said, you know what? I love all this work over here, but this work is the work that men really want and need, because it's not about what side of the fence you're on or anything else. It's just what's going on for you, brother. Having someone ask that and really want to know. And can I please, in the name of God, tell you what's going on for me? Because I don't want to keep it all, I want to move it out. And that's the distinction that I'm making right now. Some men are going to go for power because I believe fundamentally they don't have that other community of meaningful, authentic, lasting local friendships that we used to have as boys. We used to have this. We had it, Jenna. We had this as boys, and we know what it feels like. But it got taken away, it got removed. And that, my friend, is not genetic. That's not biological. That's culture. That's fucking culture 100%.
Mark, I do want to flag, you didn't see this because you were talking so beautifully, that the tag that I used, the way that I described this episode from Mountain Expert is actually really triggering, folks. And I want to like call that out. Um, and I want to sort of center that in some way, recognizing that I'm the one who titled it. It wasn't Mark. Mark is actually a professional in this space. And while we think expert is a subjective word, I do believe that his publications qualify him as somebody who understands the male psyche. But, one of the things that, to me, a big military parade for folks to see is actually a reflection of deep insecurity. That if you need to demonstrate how, it's almost like I call, this is a terrible example. It's not terrible, it's brilliant. And this is why I'm so confident that Jenna should be in spaces like this, is because of what I'm about to say.
Mm.
That, and I'm about to drop a contradiction. Anybody who wears a name brand, like a big logo, like a Gucci or Chanel or something that's just like, this was expensive, is thirsty for something. If I rotated the camera, you could see on the back of my door over there some handbags that clearly have the logo Gucci and Chanel on it.
Mm.
When you're rocking that swag, You are trying to send a message of who you are, what kind of currency you have. It might not necessarily be that like you're desperate for people to know that you can afford a Chanel, but there is a whole storybook offered to people when you wear that, in the same way that it would be if you wear a cross, in the same way that it would be if you wore a diamond studded cross, in the same way that it would be on like the ring size you get when you get engaged. Like there's all these signals that are desperate for people to believe a story about you, a culturally accepted story about you. When I see a grown man who is occupying already the most powerful seat in the world, whether we like it or not, have to also put out all of his Chanel bags down Pennsylvania Avenue, I go, ooh, you're thirsty for something you don't think you have. Real power, real like wealth, like the billionaires I know, you would never know were billionaires. They don't walk around with diamond encrusted watches.
Mm.
You would never, like the real wealth, you would never know. They don't have to prove anything to anyone. And so when I see Trump and what he's about to do tomorrow, I think of nothing but, oh, you are desperate for something you don't think you have.
So what do we look for? I mean, honestly, Jenna, what when we, I mean, you're talking about status and you're talking about class, mostly class, right? The idea that I can perform, that I am above, that I'm at the top of you know, wealthy white capitalist class. I'm there. I can make tanks drive down the street for me. But when we talk about status and class and all that stuff, and America is finally having a conversation about, you know, class, and we're beginning to ask ourselves questions about, um, why does everything flow up to those guys? Why does everything go up to them? Why do we give them everything, right? Why do we give them another $4 trillion tax cut? Why are we passing a bill that's going to let Trump avoid judicial review of his actions? Why are we passing a big, beautiful bill that includes fundamentally authoritarian shit in it, which will, the end result, be more wealth and power flowing up to him? Why are we doing that? Why are we so quick to do that? Why does that feel American or right or okay? Because we're all stuck in that loop, that hierarchical dominance loop, and we have been trained all our lives, conditioned to see abusive, powerful men as masculine, as the real guys, right? They're the real guys. When I would suggest to you that the real guys are the ones who have not only strength and leadership and the ability to play through the pain and all that, they also have the ability to listen with curiosity, to be a caregiver, to have empathy, to be human, and to create the community, which is where real resiliency lies. Because I'll tell you, the data is very straightforward. You know, a lot of guys that look like me, a lot of white guys in man box culture, we, you know, the rules of man box: don't show your emotions, be a breadwinner, not a caregiver, be straight, not homosexual, make money, have sex, you know, have power over women and girls, all that stuff. They're in that game for 40 years, like I was,
Right.
you know, trying to get a bigger house and the more money and whatever. Eventually, we age out of that. Trump is aging out of a lot of the functionality he needs to show power. So he's doing it now with authoritarian political stuff. But his body's failing him, you know, his physicality's failing him, hell, his hair's falling out, right? Men who exist in that culture for 20 or 30 years, we get a little high off getting a bigger house and a better looking girlfriend and all that stuff. But sooner or later, we age out of being able to do it. And that's when 75% of older white men are committing suicide. Why? Because it's not a game you can ever win at,
Right.
dominant. And sooner or later, you fail at it. And the minute you do, everybody else on that ladder says, welcome to the lower part of the ladder, motherfucker. And they push you off. So we have to ask ourselves fundamentally, what actually makes us feel alive as human beings, as you know, what makes a boy feel good about being in the world? His friends, his connections. It's not his and status. It's not that he got an A on a report. That's all fine and good. It's his friends, right? And when we have been taught that friendship is for little kids or people who are girly or gay, when the culture repeats that message over and over again, we got the research to prove that's what the message is, then we're facing lifetimes of loneliness and disconnection. So I'll tell any young man here, you know what I hate most about being on Twitch like this is I can't be in conversation with you. I can't hear your stories. I'm talking, but I'm not hearing you. I
Master
can look
Liberty's
at the
getting a
chat.
microphone. He is coming up. He is going to get a microphone. He does not have. So here's what I'm learning about the Twitch culture is that there's some people who are only consumers. They're not interested in participating, so they don't have microphones, they don't have cameras. Of which where I
Yeah.
was like, just come up one time, and Master Liberty was like, I don't have any of that gear, even though he's super active. But I do want to hear from, and Kieran's watching and is doing a great job moderating. There was somebody else who was like, this is a joke. This is like ridiculous. But I would love to hear from some more men who are watching about their friendships if they feel like they have enough friends. I have a ton of friends and I do not think I have enough friends. And not that I like need more friends because I want to go out to dinner and the movies. Each of my friendships serve very different roles. I have my
Mm.
friend who's in a very similarly structured relationship with a similarly structured man, so we get to like commiserate about the thing together. I have my friend um who we like to talk about, superficial things. I have my friend that we love to just drink tequila and play cards, and it's like mana from heaven, that friendship. Like
Mm.
I have so many needs as a human being that require sort of being next to somebody in those experiences. And I can
Yeah.
say that with my dad, my husband, my brother, my uncles, they don't have enough. They have a tiny fraction of what I have in my Rolodex and in my relationships. You know who else doesn't have enough? All of the heads of state that I'm close friends with.
Yeah.
All of
That's
the
not
heads of
surprising.
state, because there's often this belief that like somebody's trying to get something from them, so I'm gonna blah blah blah, blah. I don't
Hey,
blame
the
them.
Catalyst did a study of corporations. The loneliest people in corporations are people who've been there 6 months or less, or people who are running the corporations. They have the highest number, highest statistics of loneliness. And Jenna, women. The myth is that women are much better at having friendships than men. The fact is, women are more willing to have friendships than men, but men are very good at having close, caring friendships. We do that shit beautifully, but only when we see it modeled by somebody, when we feel like it's okay, and we feel like we're not going to get grief for it, right? So the system and the culture kind of blocks us from doing that. But when you get men into a place where they can begin to share what's going on for them and connect, they do it, and the other thing I would say, if people are coming into the chat here saying, I got plenty of friends, good for you, brother. Now, know that the fucking data from Cigna says that 56% of people in the United States of America feel sometimes or always alone. So if you're not, look around you, because half the people you can see are lonely. Make a
Oh
friendship with
God,
one of
that's
them.
so hard to hold.
Offer support to other men. If you've got this figured out, good for you. But I will say this also, a lot of guys who come on the walk with me, they say, yeah, I came on this walk because this is what I want. And I've joined softball teams and I've done a bunch of other stuff. And yeah, we're talking and we're having beer afterwards and whatever, but I don't feel like I know those guys any better than when I started. And when the
Right,
softball season ended, I didn't see them anymore.
right,
So we call these friendships of proximity, right? Guys we know at work, guys we know at the gym. Oh yeah, I know all those guys at the gym. Great guys. I change my gym. I just drop all those friendships and take the
right,
next one because
right.
it's all the same, right? It's all that surface level stuff. We talk about sports. Don't talk about anything deep. What I'm saying is that friendships where we're looking for folks who are like us and folks who talk like us and folks who can mimic the way we perform what's accepted in the culture are different, and they're comforting. I enjoy them. They're great, but they're different than the kind of friendships you need when you're in crisis. And we're all going to be in crisis at some point. But in the meantime, we can offer support to other men, which is a beautiful part of being a man and which so few of us ever get to do.
I would love to hear from some people about their friendships. And like, actually, let's just do this because it could take too long to write if you guys don't feel like it. But like, just like send a bat signal. How many of y'all feel like you have enough friends? Mark, do you feel like you have enough friends as someone who I just suggested as an expert? Like, do you
No,
think you do?
no. And honestly, this is the insane part. I spent 15, 20 years writing and speaking on men's isolation. Last November is the first time I put something up on Reddit about our walking, talking men for my neighborhood, period, ever, anything. I started the damn thing in November. And now I have three more friends in the neighborhood, and I didn't have them before. And sure, I got some friends that I know in other states and in the work and whatever, but that's not the same. So right now, I feel like I'm closer to there. But the other thing that's fascinating about this, Jenna, is that a friendship isn't something you isn't a light switch, right? Okay, this guy I went on a walk with him, he's my friend now. I tell these guys, you need to get 40 conversations with a person before you really form what a friendship is, because over the course of 40 conversations, coffee, walking, whatever it is, you begin to see them in the different versions of themselves, right? They're having a good day, they're having a bad day, they're in a crisis, they're joyful, they've had a big success. All of the ways that we show up over time, that's the kind of friendships we had as young boys. We saw each other every day for years, and this is what real friendship is. And it's not some guys you know at the gym. It's not. This is different. And when we do the 40 walks or the 40 coffees or the 40 conversations, you get this rich level of trust with that person. These guys I'm walking with, the new guys, I love these guys. They're great guys. There's a guy named Rick I met. He's a good guy. I know Ben now, but I've only had about 10 conversations with him. So when I show up, I'm kind of checking myself, making sure I'm ready, getting there. I got a friend named Mark Weidman, the only friend I've known for 2 or 3 years. He co-founded this with me. When I see him, there's no prep, nothing. I'm just, hey, brother.
Do you think you could? And I do want to get back to Trump and recognize that we only have like 8 more minutes. Master Liberty, if you want to come on, we won't move schedules around. But do you? I think there's ways to catapult those kinds of relationships. Like if you can get vulnerable quick, can get if
Yep.
you get vulnerable quick, then they're like, ooh, maybe I can too.
There's a friend of mine, Ray Ray Arata, who's done hundreds of men's work weekends as a leader, who's been in this work for a long time. Um, he said the way you do any of this is you go first, and he goes first.
Yeah.
He tells something about himself that's real, and we know what real is. We know what performative real is, and we know what real is. And I can tell you, man, I this has not been an easy 3 or 4 months for me. I carry a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety right now, and I can feel it in my chest, and I can feel it in my body, and I go running to try to get through it. And I'm not going to go into all why, but if you went on a walk with me, um, I would tell you some of the stuff that's going on right now in my life, and I I wouldn't have to be afraid that it makes me look weak. I would be walking in confidence that it's actually a strength to be able to share that stuff. And you know, I I'm growing these friendships, and yes, vulnerability can accelerate that. But ultimately, we all know what it's like to connect with someone for a while and then they wander off, and that's it. We know that. We know what
Yeah.
that feels.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a common phenomenon. So the idea that the conversations go on 40 times means that person values it as much as you do. And that's what friendship is. They start to say, where is that person who is my friend? Where are they? I want to catch up with them today or tomorrow. And that's what we're building and growing. Um, and that's what fills the void. The void is boys and men carry so much grief and loss about this isolation we live with. And it's a bullshit, culturally driven war between men for competition and hierarchy. And I'm telling you, start a walk. You don't need me. I don't have anything to do with it. You want help? Call me. I'll tell you how we do
Yeah.
it. But this is your walk in your neighborhood with your friends. And if you're 20 years old, you can start one of these. If you're
Mark,
15, you can start one of these. I mean,
um,
I'm literally just do it,
what's
right?
the URL we should drop in chat so that people can be in touch with you again?
It's walkingtalkingmen.org.
walkingtalkingmen.org, of which,
Yeah.
right, okay, great. So Mark, in our final moments, I sort of want to bring it back to what we're headed into, sort of what it feels like. I
Mm.
don't know about you, but the past like 48 hours, 72 hours have felt even heavier. Certainly the past, thanks, Kieran, certainly the past, I don't know, 12 hours. But it just strikes me, actually, before I like go and pontificate about what's happening around the world, I just want to make something clear for the people that are here. That women do not find the women who have done real work on themselves, who understand like where the self-worth space is, do not find men who use that like top down desperate for power and control, avoiding caretaking because it's too fun. There's nothing sexy about that. The sexiest thing in the entire world to a woman is a man who knows himself, knows how to take care of people, knows how to have fun, knows how to ask questions about the world, astronomy, to like what the hell's happening in Tehran right now. I have no time in my life for men who are performing too hard. And I can see it from a mile away. In fact, when I see, and it happens a lot in like big sporting events, I am sort of professional sports adjacent because of where the spaces where my husband is. And sports hasn't exactly cultivated the like, the, I don't know, the other side of what contact sports require. And men like just walk in with this strut, and I swear to God, I can take them out in like a half a sentence, and they're like, and I have them in like the palm of my hand. And if they can like continue to spar and get more vulnerable, I'm like, all right, now that's sexy. Now that's cool. Now that's interesting. But the men who I oftentimes am sitting across the table on at or with when I'm on air, particularly the conservative outlets who are like, oh, wow, and like they don't know what they're saying and they're just interrupting me because it gets more inconvenient for them when I speak true my personal truth. I'm just like, oh God, you're like, don't ever sit at my table in the cafeteria. Of which I'm like, no, I want everyone to be sitting at my table right now, but it's just like it's uncool to it is uncool to not to perform this masculinity, which is why tomorrow's show down Pennsylvania attitude is so uncouth. And it just makes me feel even worse for the guy that I happen to, it's disgusting. I'm like, ugh, no cool girl was ever that into you. They can't have been.
I I will finish by saying this. Um, I didn't have much success with women until I stopped feeling fearful that I was going to fuck up with them. I was going to mess up. And that came from coming to understand and know my authentic voice, which is taken away from us by all this hyper competitive bullshit that we have to live in. And I'll tell you something, any man watching this, for a long time, I feared men. I didn't like men. I was tired of the competition. I didn't trust them. But because of the work I've done raising my son and also just doing this work, even in the last few months around this friendship thing, when I see a man now, any man, I don't care about your politics, I don't care about your status, I don't care about your profession. I just say, brother, it's amazing you're on your feet. It is. Because this fucking culture that we have to grow up in and have to navigate, all the bullying and bullshit and judgment and crap we have to deal with, it's a wonder any of us have any self esteem. And then it's miraculous that we come out and find each other and do this work. But what you're talking about, Jenna, that kind of a man who knows how to do that different relational stuff, we learn that from other men. And when we're walking in friendship with other men, we do the caregiving, we do the listening, we do the curiosity. We come to understand that a friendship isn't finding someone who's just like me. A friendship is actually being with men who are different, have a different background, different interests, different whatever. And I spent a lot of time trying to say, well, I can be friends with a guy if he's close enough aligned with my politics and my profession and all this other bullshit. And that's just more conformity, more demanding that men conform to something or another. So I love your narrative about the kind of men that you notice and appreciate. But I want you to know that ultimately, these are just men coming to love themselves and understand themselves.
Right.
And we
And
cannot
that's
do that.
really hot.
Yeah, and we have to do that with other men. That work has to be done with the people who took it away from us. And women didn't take it away from us, other men did over the course of our lives. Bullied and hyper competitive men took that away from us. And we have to work with men who are caring and walking and talking and doing what we need to in order to rediscover who we are in relationship to the world. And men are a big part of that.
And I have to say, like, given a recent comment in chat, like, I am so intrigued by men who have uncomfortable relationships with women in power, or or for women who know what they want. Um, but I do sort of feel like this is a space, and feel free to clarify yourself. Let's go, Ice. Um, but and I'm not offended by it, and Mark is happy to invite you in too. But it's sort of like, is there a discomfort being in spaces with, for some men, with women who are calling bullshit on the game, or who aren't interested in playing the game you've all been raised to play?
It's a good point. The counterpoint, of course, is be a man who's not playing the game and get called out for it by women who have internalized all that man box stuff and
And want
want you to
that.
do.
Right. Right. Like,
That's the
sort of
flip
like
side of it. I
trad
just want to
wifey stuff.
acknowledge something. I just want to acknowledge something Master of Liberty said, which is really good. He said, fear of failure is wise. Failure to act due to fear is foolish. And I agree with him. And I think most of us, I'm not going to try to interpret what you said beyond just that's a good statement. I'm going to say this separate from that we as men have been taught to keep our heads down, duck and cover, don't fucking stick our necks out in any way. Because if we do, we start to look like we're not playing the game, right? That's the fear that's the failure to act, right? Even though we feel kind of empty and frustrated and anxious and like this isn't working, I would say that no matter where you are on the spectrum of masculinity and the manosphere, wherever the fuck you are, and I don't pretend to have my act together. I don't. The idea that I'm a man expert is in from that positionality is comical. I am simply trying to grow and learn in relationship to other men and create some friendship. That's what I'm trying to do. But the long and short of this is your solution to every single thing you seek from women, seek from your professional life, seek from like every success metric out there is going to come from getting in touch with who you are and really coming to terms
Yeah.
with whether low self-esteem and how to get over that, get rid of that, because those are old voices aimed at you externally all your life. And when you're with men who actually care about you, it heals that shit pretty quickly.
Can I also say, like, this also translates to women. Like, this is like, we
Mhm.
we have
Sure.
we have these same metrics put upon us, of which,
Yeah.
like, everyone could think of what those kinds of things are. It's how we look, how we perform, how we show up, when we
Hmm.
speak, when we don't speak. And it's the same thing. I mean, it's the same damn thing. And this is like the stories and the frameworks that I am spending a lot of time trying to hold the magnifying glass to, because I want to understand the things that are constant bottlenecks in my own life, in my own processing, in my own psyche
Yeah.
that are preventing me from getting more free, like whatever that means.
Mhm.
And I know that those like gates that aren't haven't swung open, I didn't build them.
I'll tell you something. My son, he's more free. I may never be.
Right. I'm not getting
And
off the body shape bandwagon. I will die on that mountain for my daughter. I am not
well,
getting off that this lifetime. Too
I'm
much
telling you,
damage is done.
and I have men in men's work who are like, "Why are you saying that? You can fix anything. We can do the work." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, brother. I I came from shitopia. Now I'm in pretty okay land, and I'm running out of time. You know,
Kaylan.
because the conditioning that we deal with over the course of our lives is a deep scarring wound that you don't just get rid of, but you come to terms with it, or you find meaning in it, or you look for the gold in it, or whatever that shit is. But my son is more free, and he's more free because I loved him and I stayed with him and I did not abandon him, and I was with him through every conversation from when he first learned to speak all the way up until his present day. And I like to believe that we need that in a father. And I like to believe that that is one of the things I did well.
I
I
think you did
fucked
that
some
well.
stuff up,
I think you did
but
that well. Do you think you're
that,
ever going to think you did that well enough? Like you're even the fact that you like raised that as a friend, I'm a little bit like, Mark, it's so relieving as someone who decided that you're an expert to see that you're like, oh, I might have fucked some things up. I hope I did it well. But like, is doing it well enough gonna be a question that lingers with you?
mm. Well, what making that judgment is relational. It's made in the back and forth of the relationships we have, right? Did you do it well enough? That's not an answer I can answer alone. I answer that in relationship with
With
my son
him.
Gus.
Right.
I answer that question in relationship with my partner Saliha. That is, and it's, I could fuck it up tomorrow, but for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
moment,
Moving target.
what we're
Moving
creating
target.
collect, and it doesn't mean I don't have down moments and mess stuff up, but collectively speaking, yeah, go easy, old man. You did all right,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
and
Mark,
that's the
you
message we
keep
all want to
talking
hear
about
when
your
we're old.
age. You're not that old.
I,
You're
I,
very handsome from where I'm sitting because you
well,
know
that's
what's so
kind of,
handsome about you is you're more free. And I actually, recognizing that we are at the top of the hour and we have another brilliant guest that's coming on. But I don't actually, um, I, I don't want to let this thread go. And we have Master Liberty here, and we have the definition of freedom, uh, question lurking in chat. And he didn't actually ask the question, but you baited me, Master Liberty. So when I describe being free, it's a poetic freedom. It's
mm,
not like a construct of any of the dimensions that you offered, societal, personal, institutional, or legal. Those feel like those feel like those actually feel like very constructed pathways for a definition. All man made constructed pathways. When I think about freedom, for me, it is knowing I'm worthy of my own love. And that doesn't fall into any of those freedoms. Now, for context, Mark and
mm,
Sundi, I also see you in the chat. Sundi is our next guest. Master Liberty, who talks a lot about, has brought up constitutional language before. So there's a deep relationship with some of those with some of that language, that text. Some not I don't know if I would say stories. I don't feel like I've seen that yet with him. But it does feel like when someone says to me like what's your goal, and I'm like I don't know, to get us more free, and then they're like but how, in one way, and it is never about policy. It is never about politics.
Mhm.
I have a plethora of blessings that come in the form of privileges that I can trade in all these different markets in the world. And I still lay in bed and go, am I good enough? And I want to be more free of that question.
Mm.
And I don't think I'm the only one. So do I call it spiritual? It's not. It's more than that. The
You know,
only places, I'll wrap this up real quick and then Mark, I want to hear your thoughts. The only people that I have heard be able to articulate the freedom that I'm seeking, and I don't even know if I trust their quotes because I think
hmm,
they've probably potentially been manufactured or evolved or are indigenous communities of this land. So when I hear and see texts when I hear texts and perspectives on what it means to be free, it is a deep connection to the rhythms of the comings and goings of the planet, of which I'm not connected to, of each other in friendship, of, as Mark is talking about, of each other in fear and concern and joy and celebration.
mm.
So is it self-actualization? No, it's not spiritual. It's none of those things. I'm not going to let you, Master Liberty, add any single word in front of the word freedom, because freedom's the only one that can embody it. And I just wonder if I'm trying to get free, other people might be too. And I wonder if that's what is at the heart of what you're saying, Mark.
I think for me, um, something changed over the course of the last 10 or 15 years, and it took work and time and effort. I had to come to terms with my victimhood frame, the idea that the world fucked me up and broke me, and therefore, sorry, that's just the way I am. All those
Mm.
kinds of ideas. I had to work through all that, had to do the work, get free of it. But for me, what freedom actually has become is the ability to walk up to a group of men, some of who I've never met before, standing around getting ready to start a walk and feel joy. Feel like, hey, look at you guys. Hey, let's talk. I'm me. I mean, not walking up, okay, are they going to judge me if I got the right whatever? No, I've liberated myself to love other people.
Ooh.
And that piece came from me loving myself, just getting there. And love is not I'm the best thing fucking ever. Love is
Right.
just acceptance. It's just I'm me, man. I'm this stuff. And when I talk to anybody, I just want to hear their story. Their stories are so interesting to me. It's so beautiful and so fascinating. But the energy that goes back and forth because I'm free is the energy of why I want to get up in the morning. I don't want to fucking argue about politics. I don't want to talk about the structural and shit. I can, but it's not my core joy. My core joy is to be free to love people.
So anyway, this is the Church of Mark. Mark, I
Oh my
really
god.
appreciate it. I know. It's really
Ah,
intense. I know, it's really intense. I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful to everyone who asked and posed questions. We didn't actually get too much about what is going to happen tomorrow, but we have another amazing voice, Sunday Williams, who is going to join us in about 8 minutes or so. Mark will be a frequent voice in this space, and we would love to. The Army's birthday, Master Liberty. Yeah. So we are going to, okay. Bye, Mark. We'll see you again soon.